The glass shattered at 2:17 a.m. A sound so sharp it ripped Jamie Rivera from sleep, heart pounding like a drum in a silent room. The Chicago wind howled outside, rattling the old windows of their Pilsen loft. But this was different, deliberate, malicious. Someone was in the apartment. Jamie bolted upright, clutching the worn sketchbook that never left their side. Its pages filled with half-finished dreams and portraits of a life they were still trying to define. The air felt thick, heavy with the kind of dread that only comes when you know you're not alone. Barefoot, they crept toward the bedroom door, the cold hardwood biting their soles, every creak of the floorboards screaming betrayal. They dialed 911 with trembling fingers, whispering into the phone as if the intruder might hear. "Someone's in my apartment," they hissed, voice barely steady. "Please, hurry." The operator's calm instructions felt like a lifeline, but the weight was agony. Every shadow seemed to move, every gust of wind a footstep. Jamie pressed their back against the wall, eyes darting to the living room where the broken window gaped like a wound, letting in the rain and something far worse. When the knock came firm, authoritative, Jamie nearly dropped the phone. "Chicago PD. Open the door." The voice was steady, grounding, like it could hold the world together. Jamie stumbled to the door, fumbling with the locks, and swung it open to find Officer Ryan Callahan standing there, rain dripping from his navy blue cap, his badge glinting under the hallway light. He was younger than Jamie expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp green eyes that scanned the room before softening on them. "You okay?" he asked, and it wasn't just procedure, it was real. "Two don't know," Jamie stammered, clutching the sketchbook tighter. "I heard glass. Someone was here." Their voice cracked, and they hated how small it sounded. Ryan stepped inside, his presence filling the space, not just with authority, but with something warmer, something that made Jamie's chest ache in a way they couldn't name. He moved with purpose, checking corners, the broken window, the muddy footprints trailing across the floor. "Looks like they're gone," he said finally, turning to Jamie. "But you're not staying here alone tonight. Not with that window." His tone was firm, but his eyes held a quiet plea, like he was asking permission to care. Jamie nodded, too shaken to argue. The loft, once a sanctuary of color and chaos, canvases stacked against walls, paint-splattered furniture, now felt like a crime scene. Ryan radioed for backup to secure the scene, but when he hung up, he didn't leave. "Mind if I stay till they get here?" he asked, and Jamie, still clutching the sketchbook, whispered, "Please." They sat on the couch, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. Jamie's hands shook as they opened the sketchbook, revealing a half-finished drawing of a vibrant street mural, all bold lines and defiant colors. Ryan glanced at it, his expression softening. "You're an artist," he said, not a question but a statement, like he saw something in Jamie they hadn't shown anyone in years. "Yeah," Jamie said, voice barely above a whisper. "Trying to be." They didn't know why they said it, why they let this stranger in. But Ryan's steady presence felt like the only thing keeping the walls from closing in. He told them about his beat, about nights spent chasing shadows in Pilsen, about the kids he tried to steer away from gangs. Jamie listened, their fear ebbing with every word, replaced by something unfamiliar: connection. When backup arrived, Ryan didn't leave. He stayed, helping board up the window, his hands steady where Jamie's shook. And when the other officers left, he lingered, his gaze catching Jamie's in a way that felt like a question neither was ready to ask. "You don't have to stay," Jamie said, but their voice betrayed them, pleading for the opposite. Ryan's jaw tightened, and he shook his head. I'm not leaving you alone tonight. He said it like a vow, and Jamie's heart stuttered. They talked until the rain slowed. About art. About Chicago. About the lives they'd both been running from. Jamie told him about growing up non-binary in a world that demanded boxes. About the murals they painted to reclaim their voice. Ryan listened. Really listened. And when he spoke, it was about his own struggles, about being a cop in a city that didn't always trust him. About hiding who he was to fit the badge. I'm gay, he said quietly, the words heavy with years of silence. Not exactly something you shout in the precinct. Jamie's breath caught. They hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected the way it made their heart race. I'm non-binary, they said, the words a confession and a bridge. Ryan nodded, like he'd known, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The night stretched on, and somewhere between the broken glass and the dawn creeping through the boarded window, Ryan's hand found Jamie's. It wasn't planned. Wasn't anything but two people finding something real in the wreckage. He held them, strong and steady, until the first light broke, and Jamie realized they weren't afraid anymore. But the footprints on the floor weren't random. They led somewhere, to someone, and Jamie's past wasn't as far behind them as they'd hoped. The morning light was cruel, exposing the chaos of Jamie's loft in stark, detail-shattered glass glittering on the floor, muddy footprints smearing their carefully curated life. Jamie stood frozen, staring at the mess, while Ryan, still in his uniform, brewed coffee in the tiny kitchen like he'd lived there forever. You don't have to do that, Jamie said, their voice hoarse from a sleepless night. But Ryan just shrugged, handing them a mug with a small, grounding smile. You need something normal right now, he said, and Jamie couldn't argue. The warmth of the mug seeped into their hands, tethering them to the moment, but their eyes kept drifting to the footprints. They weren't random scuffs. They formed a deliberate path from the window to the bedroom door, stopping just short of where Jamie had hidden. Someone had been looking for them. Ryan noticed their gaze. We'll figure this out, he said, his voice low but certain. He'd called in a forensics team, but the wait was agonizing, and Jamie's mind raced with possibilities. Was it a random break-in? A targeted hit? They hadn't told Ryan everything not about the threatening letters they'd found tucked into their mailbox months ago, scrawled with slurs and warnings to stop painting. They'd dismissed them as cruel pranks. But now, with the footprints staring back, doubt gnawed at them. Let's get you out of here for a bit, Ryan suggested, his tone gentle but firm. Jamie hesitated, clutching their sketchbook like a shield, but the loft felt like a trap. They nodded, and soon they were walking through Pilsen's vibrant streets, murals bursting with color on every corner. Jamie's own work, a defiant portrait of a queer couple embracing under a rainbow of stars, loomed large on a nearby wall, a beacon of pride that now felt like a target. Ryan walked close, his presence a quiet anchor. This your work? He asked, pausing in front of the mural. Jamie nodded, their throat tight. It's beautiful, he said, and the sincerity in his voice cracked something open in Jamie. They wanted to tell him everything about the letters, the fear, the way they'd poured their soul into that mural to prove they could exist unapologetically. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, they walked to a small cafe, where Ryan insisted on paying for their coffee. Over steaming cups, he told Jamie about his life, about growing up in a conservative suburb, about the father who'd called him a disgrace when he came out, about the precinct where he kept his truth locked away. Jamie listened, their own walls crumbling. I paint to be seen, they admitted, voice barely audible. But sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. It is, Ryan said, his hand brushing Jamie's across the table. The touch was fleeting but electric, and Jamie's heart raced with something they hadn't felt in years. Hope. Back at the loft, the forensics team was finishing up. No fingerprints, the lead tech said, frowning. But those footprints. Size 10. Men's boots. Deep tread. Whoever it was, they were careful. Ryan's jaw tightened, and he exchanged a look with Jamie that said he wasn't letting this go. He stayed as the team left, helping Jamie clean the glass, his hands steady where theirs shook. "You're not alone in this," he said, and Jamie believed him. But that night, as they sat together on the couch, the air heavy with unspoken truths, Jamie's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You can't hide forever." Their blood ran cold. They showed it to Ryan, whose eyes darkened with resolve. "We're finding who did this," he said, his voice a promise. He didn't leave that night either, sleeping on the couch with his gun within reach, a silent guardian in a world that felt increasingly dangerous. Jamie lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of Ryan's presence both a comfort and a complication. They'd spent years building walls, painting their truth in broad strokes for the world to see, but never letting anyone close. Now, with Ryan here, those walls were crumbling, and Jamie wasn't sure if they were ready for what lay on the other side. But the text wasn't a prank. It was a warning, and the person behind it was closer than either of them realized. The next day, Chicago woke under a gray sky, the kind that made the city feel like it was holding its breath. Jamie sat at their easel, trying to lose themselves in a new sketch, but every stroke felt wrong, tainted by the text still burning in their mind. "You can't hide forever." Ryan had taken their phone to the precinct, promising to trace the number, but the waiting was a slow poison. He'd insisted on staying close, taking a personal day to keep an eye on Jamie. "You don't have to do this," Jamie said as Ryan checked the locks for the third time that morning. He just looked at them, his green eyes steady. "I want to." And Jamie, despite the fear clawing at their chest, felt a warmth they couldn't ignore. They spent the day together, moving through Pilsen like a fragile bubble in a storm. Ryan took Jamie to a community center where he volunteered, introducing them to kids who painted murals to escape the streets. Jamie saw themselves in those kids, defiant, searching, afraid of being erased. They taught a quick lesson, guiding small hands to blend colors, and Ryan watched with a quiet pride that made Jamie's heart ache. But the bubble burst when Ryan's phone rang. His face darkened as he listened, then hung up. "The number's a burner," he said, his voice tight. "Untraceable. But we found something else." He hesitated, like he didn't want to say it. "The boots from the footprints. They match a pair sold at a store near your old neighborhood. Someone you know might be involved." Jamie's stomach dropped. Their old neighborhood, Bridgeport, was where they'd grown up, where they'd first come out, where the slurs and threats had started. They hadn't been back in years, not since their family had all but disowned them. Could it be random? They asked, but Ryan's silence was answer enough. That night, they sat on the fire escape, the city sprawling below, its lights a map of dreams and dangers. Jamie told Ryan about Bridgeport, about the father who'd called them a mistake, about the brother who'd stayed silent. Ryan listened, his hand resting close to Jamie's, not touching but there, a promise of safety. "I didn't choose this," Jamie said, voice breaking. "Being non-binary, painting, any of it. But it's who I am." Ryan turned to them, his face soft in the dim light. "You're not a mistake," he said, and the words landed like a lifeline. He reached for their hand, and this time, Jamie didn't pull away. They sat there, fingers entwined, the city humming around them, and for a moment, the world felt right. But the moment shattered when Ryan's radio crackled. A disturbance call. Just blocks away a vandalism report at Jamie's mural. They raced to the scene. Ryan's cruiser cutting through the night. When they arrived, Jamie's heart sank. The mural their defiant queer couple was defaced. Slurs scrawled across it in red paint. The same color as the threats in their mailbox. Ryan's hand found Jamie's shoulder, steadying them as they fought back tears. "We'll find them," he said, but Jamie's eyes were locked on the paint, on the hatred that felt personal, targeted. They didn't notice the figure watching from the shadows across the street, their face hidden but their intent clear. Back at the loft, Ryan didn't leave. He sat with Jamie, helping them scrub the image from their mind, if not the wall. They talked until dawn, about fear, about courage, about the lives they wanted but hadn't dared dream. And when Jamie fell asleep, head on Ryan's shoulder, it was the first time in years they'd felt safe. But safety was an illusion. The figure in the shadows wasn't a stranger, and their next move would bring Jamie's past crashing into their present. The precinct was a hive of noise and chaos, but Jamie felt like they were drowning in silence. They sat across from Ryan at his desk, the threatening letters spread out like a confession. Ryan's eyes scanned each one, his jaw tight, his fingers twitching like he wanted to punch something. "Why didn't you tell me about these sooner?" he asked, not accusing but pleading. Jamie looked away, their hands twisting in their lap. "I thought I could handle it," they said, voice small. "I thought if I ignored it, it'd go away." But it hadn't. The break-in, the text, the defaced mural, it was all connected. A noose tightening around Jamie's life. Ryan leaned forward, his voice low. "You don't have to handle it alone." He reached for their hand, a brief, grounding touch that made Jamie's chest ache. They wanted to believe him, wanted to lean into the safety he offered. But the letters, each one more vicious than the last, screamed that trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. The precinct's tech team had pulled a partial print from one of the letters, a faint smudge that pointed to a name, Michael Rivera, Jamie's brother. The room spun as Ryan explained, his voice steady but laced with regret. Michael, who'd stood silent when their father kicked Jamie out. Michael, who'd never called, never reached out, but whose boots matched the footprints in Jamie's loft. "I need to talk to him," Jamie said, their voice trembling but resolute. Ryan nodded, but his eyes were worried. "Not alone," he said, and Jamie didn't argue. They drove to Bridgeport, the streets heavy with memories of rejection, of a home that had never been theirs. Michael's apartment was a rundown walk-up, the kind of place that screamed neglect. When he opened the door, Jamie barely recognized him, older, harder, with eyes that carried the same anger as their father's. "What do you want?" Michael spat, his gaze flickering to Ryan's uniform. Jamie's throat tightened, but they forced the words out. "Was it you? The break-in? The mural?" Michael's silence was deafening, his jaw clenching as he looked away. "You don't belong here," he said finally, his voice low and venomous. "You never did." Ryan stepped forward, his presence a shield. "Answer the question," he said, his tone leaving no room for evasion. Michael's eyes flashed, but he didn't deny it. "I just wanted you to stop," he said, the words dripping with resentment. "Stop flaunting it. Stop painting your filth all over the city." Jamie's heart shattered, but they stood taller, their voice steady. "It's not filth. It's me." Michael's face twisted, but before he could respond, Ryan's radio crackled a report of another vandalism, this time at the community center. Jamie's stomach dropped. It wasn't over. They raced to the scene, finding the center's mural a collage of kids' dreams defaced with the same red paint, the same slurs. But this time, there was a witness, a kid from the center, trembling but defiant, who'd seen a man in a hoodie running away. It wasn't just him, the kid said, pointing to a sketch Jamie had drawn of the suspect. There were others. Ryan's face hardened. This isn't just personal, he said, pulling Jamie aside. It's organized. He didn't say it, but Jamie knew, a hate group, targeting them, their art, their existence. Fear clawed at them, but Ryan's hand on their arm was a lifeline. We'll stop them, he said, and Jamie believed him, because they had to. That night, Ryan stayed again, not on the couch, but beside Jamie, their hands intertwined as they faced the dark together. I'm scared, Jamie whispered, and Ryan pulled them close, his voice a quiet vow. I'm here. And as dawn broke, Jamie knew they were falling for him, for the man who'd walked into their life through a broken window and stayed to mend their heart. But the threat was growing, and Michael wasn't acting alone. The real danger was still out there, watching, waiting. The city felt like a battlefield, each mural a front line in a war Jamie hadn't chosen. They stood with Ryan outside the community center, the defaced mural a wound that cut deeper than the one on their own work. The kid's sketch of the suspect burned in Jamie's pocket, a clue to a truth they weren't ready to face. Ryan's hand rested on their shoulder, steady as always, but his eyes were scanning the street. Ever the cop, ever their protector. We've got a lead, he said, his voice low. The precinct had cross-referenced the kid's description with local reports, pointing to a group called the True Order, a hate group with a history of targeting queer spaces. Michael wasn't just a lone actor, he was one of them. Jamie's heart sank, the betrayal sharper than any threat. Their own brother, part of something so vile. Ryan took Jamie to a safe house, a small apartment on the edge of Pilsen, insisting they stay out of sight while the precinct built a case. I can't lose you, he said, the words raw, unguarded. Jamie's breath caught, and they reached for him, their kiss a desperate collision of fear and longing. It was their first, but it felt like a promise, a vow to survive this together. Days blurred into nights, the safe house a cocoon where Jamie and Ryan grew closer, sharing stories, fears, dreams. Jamie sketched Ryan's face, capturing the strength in his jaw, the softness in his eyes. Ryan told Jamie about the life he wanted, one where he could be himself, not just a cop, not just a secret. I want you in that life, he said, and Jamie's heart soared, even as fear lingered. The breakthrough came when Ryan's partner at the precinct called. They'd tracked the True Order to a warehouse in Bridgeport, where Michael and others were planning something bigger, a coordinated attack on Pilsen's Pride Festival, where Jamie's newest mural was set to be unveiled. We're moving in tonight, Ryan said, his voice steady but his eyes pleading with Jamie to stay safe. But Jamie couldn't stay behind. This is my fight too, they said, and Ryan, after a long, tortured pause, nodded. They went together, Ryan in his tactical gear, Jamie with their sketchbook, a talisman against the dark. The warehouse raid was chaos, shouts, flashing lights, the crack of gunfire. Ryan shielded Jamie as they arrested Michael and his cohorts, the air thick with betrayal and relief. Michael's eyes met Jamie's as he was cuffed, and for a moment, there was something like regret in his gaze. But Jamie turned away, choosing Ryan's hand over the past. The True Order was dismantled, their plans exposed, and Pilsen streets were safe again for now. At the Pride Festival, Jamie's mural was unveiled, a vibrant tapestry of queer love, resilience, and defiance, painted with the kids from the community center. Ryan stood beside them, his hand in theirs, no longer hiding. The crowd cheered, and Jamie felt something shift not just in them, but in the city. They'd faced hate and won, not with fists but with art, with love, with the courage to exist. That night, back in the loft, Ryan held Jamie till dawn, their bodies tangled in a promise of tomorrow. The broken window was fixed, the footprints gone, but the scars remained a reminder of what they'd survived. Jamie knew the fight wasn't over. Not for them. Not for anyone like them. But with Ryan by their side, they were ready to keep painting, keep loving, keep living. And as the first light broke, Jamie whispered, "Thank you for staying." Ryan kissed their forehead, his voice soft but sure. "Always."